Good morning. I'd like to welcome you to this Oceania semester presentation. Today is Biology Department Day in regard to the Oceania semester. We have consecutive presentations by two of our finest faculty members. Dr. Jason Willen talked last hour on the Great Barrier Reef of Australia and the challenges that it's facing, and now Dr. David Penning has come up with this rather unique presentation. And don't you just love the title? When we scheduled these presentations, I always challenge our presenters to come up with a creative and exciting title, and both of them certainly did today. So Dr. David Penning, Assistant Professor of Biology and Environmental Health, he's been on the faculty since 2016, and he is really developing a reputation for Missouri Southern through his reptiles, more specifically snakes. He has a collection of about 115 snakes over in the snake room in Reynolds Hall. You should check it out. And I know you're going to become hungry today after watching these presentations. Afterwards, I'd encourage you to go over to the Billingsley Student Center and sample some Vegemite, which is an Australian staple. Every Australian household has a jar of Vegemite. And it kind of has a bitter taste. They put it on bread, on crackers. You'll have to go over and see if you like it. I'm not particularly fond of it, but go to Australia, you find it everywhere. And for those of you who are taking the surveys after each Oceania semester event, you can find the URL and the QR code inside the brochure. But the event code for this presentation is 2607. 2607 if you want to complete that survey and be entered for a $1,000 study abroad grant. So without further ado, let's bring up the snake man, Dr. David Penning.
All right, so did it come back on again? I think I can hear it a little. So if you were here for Jason's talk, this will be equally as depressing. It will not have happy endings. These are just stories of what have happened. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what has come from the knowledge we've gained from these events, but I'm just going to spoil it for you. We've lost 2 battles, and I'm just going to tell you the story of the battles that we've lost. That's effectively what I'm going to do today. So we're going to start with, I'll get away from that microphone. We're going to start with Guam. So Guam's here. It's a U.S. held territory. To give you an idea of the size, that's the size of Guam. It's fairly small. It's also unique for a number of different reasons. It's far away from both the Australian continents and the Asian mainland, which means it's fairly difficult to get there. Like, evolutionarily speaking, it's hard to find your way accidentally to Guam. So what does show up there is going to be something that probably has a high ability to disperse, like flighted animals. What's not going to show up there are things like Sumatran rhinos or any amphibian, because the ocean is saltwater and that's just lava to their physiology. So the dispersal ability to get out to Guam is really low, which means that what's out there is really endemic and isolated. On an island over evolutionary time, an animal takes one of 2 strategies, and it seems to always be true. Get huge or get tiny. They don't stay the same size. They either triple their size or reduce their size down to something that doesn't even look like what they once were. So for whatever reason, an island species doesn't really represent what it looks like on the mainland. So we have Guam. If you look at Earth's history, humans haven't been on Guam for very long. We've been there for a couple thousand years. That's a blip on the grand scheme of things. It's traded hands a few times. The U.S. took it over after the Spanish-American War. Japan stepped in for a moment. We got it back in the 1940s. So it's currently a U.S. held territory. That exchange in 1944 likely caused one of the worst catastrophes for Guam because we accidentally introduced something. So I'm going to kind of tell you what it was like. So green means forest, if you want to think about it that way. So this is Guam in all of its different ecosystems. It's largely a forested island. There's also quite a bit of non-woody vegetation areas, but it is basically a forest island. The largest landowner for Guam is the U.S. military. They currently own or oversee about 30% of the island surface area. There are urban areas, there are developed areas, but for the most part, it's still a fairly kind of wild and naturalistic ecosystem. The 3 species of bats that, actually let's just go with 3 species of mammals entirely that live on Guam are, or were, 3 species of flighted mammals. We don't have a terrestrial mammal living on Guam besides humans, which are an invasive species, and rats that come along with humans. So we don't have actually naturalistic ground-dwelling mammals in Guam. We have 3 species of bats. Mariana fruit bat is endangered. I hope you liked their pictures. The other 2 are extinct. So those are gone. So we have lost 66% of the population of all the native mammals on Guam, and the last species isn't really doing that hot. Birds. White-tailed tropic bird seems to be doing okay. It lives on kind of coastal beachy areas, so it's not actually in the woodlands, so it's otherwise doing fine. Micronesian scrub fowl, Guam rail, white-browed crake, all gone. Okay, more birds, right? The always exotic pigeon has made its way to Guam. So we have the black drongo, sparrows, and rock pigeons. They're all exotics and introduced. They, ironically or unironically, are doing just fine. So they've been introduced by humans, and they have no problems with what's going on with Guam. They've experienced their own expansions at their own rate. We have Guam kingfisher, warblers, fantails, flycatchers, white-eyes, and honeyeaters. They're all extinct. We have Guam kingfishers in captivity, which means that their genetics are alive, and we can only hope that we can bring back Guam's ecosystem to what it once was. But we're not about to release them, because history would literally repeat itself. We'd see these things get eaten. So the question becomes, what is going on? Why are we seeing these rapid catastrophes? All of these extinctions are post-1944. So all of these extinctions have happened since we retook over Guam and started to control. If you go there, I'm not old enough to have experienced this, right? Most of you aren't old enough to experience this. If you went to Guam after World War II, it sounded different. It's silent in the forests now. We're out of songbirds. They're just not there anymore. You can hear the Eurasian sparrow. You can hear those in the Target parking lot today. Like, they're everywhere. So it's not this exotic thing. It's not this exclusive thing. It's these invasives doing fine. It's the brown tree snake. The brown tree snake is probably one of the most successful invasive species that exists. I define success as they're doing great and everything else is doing terrible. That's not success. From their perspective, doing wonderful. So they're native to northern Australia, Southeast Asia, quite a few different islands in the Philippines, Borneo, Papua New Guinea. Guam is quite a bit away from there. What we did have in the United States were military airports and stations in Southeast Asia during World War II. And what we would constantly do is take cargo planes from that location to Guam, where we took it back. Based on the genetic diversity, we think that all of the brown tree snakes in Guam came from one pregnant female that hitched a ride on a plane. But since we didn't see it physically come off the plane, we can't blame ourselves entirely. We were just the only planes coming in and out in those years. So this is a US-caused catastrophe, and ironically, it's now a US problem that we have to try to bring back. So I'm going to kind of tell you a little bit about the brown tree snake and what we're doing about it, and then I'll kind of switch to Australia. All right, for me, this animal is super interesting. It's a constrictor and it's venomous. Most people, there's a decent number of snakes that do that, so that's not like the world's exclusive. But it means that it's good at killing from 2 different mechanisms. It's mildly venomous, which means it's not going to kill you because you're big, you have a fairly complex metabolism. A mammal this size is relatively rare, so you've got a lot of immunity that you could deal with before it could actually affect you. But if you're a bird or small mammal, that's a lot of venom. So if they simply bite you, you can die. Or if they bite you and get a hold of you, they can constrict you. So they've got a twofer on 2 of the most successful predation mechanisms that snakes have ever evolved. They're outstanding climbers. Think about their body as a single octopus tentacle. If they can touch you with it, they can grip you with it, and then they can climb all around. So as long as their tail can grip something, it's prehensile, like a marsupial's tail, they can span 90% of their body length. Some of these snakes get 10 feet long, which means that they can span an empty gap of 9 feet. With nothing to climb onto, they can just orient their body and bridge the gap. So these are incredibly effective climbers. It's ironic to me that it currently is costing the U.S. military money. Since 2007, $4.5 million in electrical shortages. Transformers are warm. These snakes like warm spots. They're outstanding climbers. So they just climb to the warm spots and short out like a city block because they're trying to go to that location. So just the number of snakes causing infrastructure damage is through the roof. Yeah, they're outstanding climbers, highly successful invaders. So the question becomes, what are they actually doing? Well, we know that they've physically removed the birds, they've eaten them and produced more snakes, but what kind of consequence does that actually have? And it turns out they're modifying the forest. So the snakes show up, remove the seed dispersing birds, and now the forest is dying as a result. So we're in a weird situation where we have to step in and be birds as humans to make sure that the forest stays foresty. So on the left-hand side, you've got two kind of heat density maps. The dark green spots with the circles are a parent tree, and the fading green outside of it is where the seeds can go when there are seed dispersing birds there. So the birds will eat the seeds, they're carrying it, they'll fly away, they'll poop it out somewhere else, and they've got a nice little dispersal mechanism there. The other two on your right are what Guam's experiencing. The seeds are dropping, the seeds aren't germinating. It's actually pretty bad for a parent plant to have a seed of its own type germinate underneath it, because now you're competing with yourself. So they'll inhibit seed germination of their own type directly underneath it. So all of this effort towards reproduction is just dead the year that it's dropped because they're not being germinated. So we're seeing a loss in seed dispersal. What we know is that Guam has these snakes, right? The brown tree snake of Southeast Asia has made it to Guam. We have 3 islands that are snakeless. That's not true now. Saipan has them. We don't know how they got there. A report in 2001 said, hey, we found them. That's our level of knowledge. Saipan has its own birds. Saipan has its own endemic things. Saipan has its own endangered animals. Saipan in 10 years will have its own extinct animals. We have better cameras now that we can, did that just get really loud? We have better cameras now that we can take better photos of those animals so that we can make good coffee book demonstrations of what once lived here. But that's the challenge with a snake like this. These entire ecosystems don't have snakes, which means they have no defense mechanisms against these snakes. So how can a forest regenerate without birds? That's a conservative estimate. To me, as a scientist, as a snake biologist, I'm like, man, I could just fly there and grab snakes. This is the world's easiest sample size. An acre of land is 12 to 20 snakes per acre. That is an incredibly high density. Imagine you were a bird living in an area where everywhere you land, there is an animal that can consume you in an incredibly high density. You're not sleeping, probably. You're probably not reproducing. So even if you are somehow able to live, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to carry out your normal mechanisms because death is effectively everywhere. So this is the weirdest story that seems to maybe work. This is the only way we've been able to effectively treat these snakes. We got helicopters and we dropped dead mice over the ecosystem that were laced with things that would kill the snakes. You can go and try to manually remove these snakes. Congratulations, you've done nothing. There's 1,000 more of them. So we have to figure out how we can target these individuals. So I don't know the person, but I just love the fact that an environmental assessment had to be written. It was like, okay, so we're going to fly a helicopter filled with dead rodents, and then we're going to shove them in the helicopter with little mini rodent parachutes. That's 100% what this was. So this is what, we have some beta testing here, but this is what the actual parachute was. It's not really a parachute, but it's kind of an equally weighted thing. So on the left is the mouse. They shoved some Tylenol in it. Tylenol is deadly to most reptiles, and it's harmless to most other things, which means it's selective poison. It's not going to harm anything else because the brown tree snakes ate everything else. So it's unlikely that it's going to harm stuff that doesn't exist. So we've got a poisoned mouse on the left and an equally weighted piece of cardboard on the right, and then basically a horseshoe piece of tissue paper. So somebody's in a helicopter frisbeeing, this is 100% true, frisbeeing rodents out into the ecosystem so they get trapped in trees so that the brown tree snakes find them, eat them, and die. So this was deployed, I think, in 2016. I don't have current numbers on what it was, but this seems to be one of the best mechanisms we have of selectively killing this individual snake by raining mouse hellfire down on top of it. This is a very strange thing. And then the one other thing we're trying to bring back with is, okay, we've lost seed dispersers. Can we mimic that? Can we get something back in the ecosystem that will at least serve that job so that the forest remains? So we've identified at least one bird that seems to at least tolerate the brown tree snakes. Like, it's not dying at the same rate, so tolerate's a little bold. It's just not extinct yet. So we're breeding it at field stations, and we're building nest boxes that are effectively snake-proof. Like, we're greasing poles and making it hard for snakes to not climb them, and then letting the birds fledge so that they can get out into an ecosystem, at least do some ecosystem service with seed dispersal before maybe the brown tree snake gets them. That's the end of the story. There's no like, it's great. No, we might lose an entire island forest. We've lost a dozen species in our lifetime. We'll probably lose the others. The only silver lining to this maybe is that the island wasn't really abundant with species. So if you're going to lose an island, it's better that it's one that doesn't have that many things to lose in the first place, but I don't consider that a silver lining. It's just, it's all dead now, and it's now just snakes. Norway rats are doing fine, so now the snakes have just switched into the classic, like, okay, I'm gonna eat pigeons and rats, and I'm also not from here. So Guam itself has just shifted the way most invasive species stories go. All right, on that uplifting note, right, Australia. I'm going to mimic, I think, what Dr. Willen said. Australians typically speak English, but their native language is screaming because everything can kill you. It's just terrifying there. It doesn't work the way, it's not really true, but like it a little bit is. All right, one, it's not a desert. There is a decent amount of desert there, but there's actually quite a bit of forest, tropical, subtropical grassland, temperate forest regions. The inner core is still desert, but the inner core is desert because of where the continent is, not because of what it once was. So that was actually water. For a long period of evolutionary time, it was a wetland, there were lakes in the middle, and then Australia just kept moving. And as it kept moving, it changed its temperature and rain patterns. And so its soil is there, the fossil record is there for forested wetlands. It's just now a kind of a really dry, uninhabited region. So we have Australia. So here's Australia. I'm gonna let it play out a few times. Over evolutionary time, Australia itself is an island, but it hung out with the other continents for a while and then decided to see other hemispheres. Like, it decided to, like, it moved away from its other locations. So over early Earth history, it's connected to South America, Africa, Antarctica. Antarctica wasn't always frozen. There's a bunch of marsupials that used to live there. They used it as a running path to get from South America to Australia, and then they separated. So in early Earth history, a lot of stuff could get to Australia, and then it's isolated. And it's isolated for a huge amount of time. And then what gets more interesting is it collides with the Asian plates. So it's Australian and African and South American in origin, and it's only recently reconnected with Southeast Asia. This is where that brown tree snake is from, and everything there is doing fine dealing with the brown tree snake. It's just a different beast in Australia. Marsupials. I have a koala story for you. I learned about this just the other day. So this is a heat map. The hotter the color, the higher the abundance of marsupials. So Australia has a ton of different stuff. Does anybody know the current problem with koalas? Chlamydia. 90% of koalas have it, and it's rampaging through their populations. Like, we have a major problem with a koala sexually transmitted disease. It's exclusive to Australia. It's a weirdly endemic disease to a koala that's also endemic to Australia. So Australia is just inherently interesting. We have pouched rats and pouched mammals. This is a quoll. It looks like a Tasmanian devil. It's the relative of the Tasmanian devil. So Tasmania is here. Mainland Australia has the quolls. So it's their relatives. They're still doing Tasmanian devil-y things. They're really mean. They have high bite forces. They're quite aggressive. The history of Australia played out the same way as every other continent. When humans got to it, we put a spear through something we could eat, and everything collapsed thereafter. So if it was big, we ate it. So around 60,000 years ago, when we start to see human evidence in the fossil record, we see collapse of most of the major large-scale marsupials. These are all kangaroo relatives. They're not tigers or lions or bears or anything like that, but they're doing tiger-y things and lion-y things and bear things with a pouch carrying their young. So this is a very distinct evolutionary history. And then we have the United States. We have our one marsupial that seems to be doing okay. Like it's competing with raccoons, and that's a pretty hard competition. So we have marsupials, so it's a marsupial continent. We have a death adder attacking its native predator, the water balloon. Its name's the death adder. Like that suggests that it's probably fairly dangerous. It's not a viper. It's heavy-bodied like a viper, but it's an elapid. Elapid snakes are the cobras, the kraits, the sea snakes, the mambas. They have neurotoxic venom. In North America, we have vipers that have hemotoxic venom. So pretty much your blood's going to have a problem. You're probably going to have tissue degradation. Get to the hospital, deal with the fallout of the medical bills, you'll be fine. Australia is neurotoxin, and it's the best analogy I have is put like a toddler behind an incredibly well-assembled entertainment system. Something's getting unplugged. Like it's just going to break. So maybe it's your lungs, maybe it's your heart, maybe it's your motor patterns, maybe it's your ability to recognize where you are. Something about your nervous system is just suddenly not going to work, and that's a major problem. So death is typically more imminent with neurotoxic snakes. So we have death adders. We have the tiger snake. Tiger snakes have weird island populations of their own where they're all eyeless. They were born with eyes. Birds pecked their eyeballs out. So the snake will crawl towards the baby birds, and the parents will beat the tiger snake as much as they can while staying away from it because it's venomous. The tiger snake is so dangerous, it does not need eyeballs. Like they suffer no fitness consequence, they live just as long, have just as many children, and they're blind in their ecosystem because their mouth is a nuclear weapon. Like you still don't attack a blind tiger snake because one bite is deadly to anything that attacks it. So they can go completely eyeless on these islands because they just want to eat baby birds. And they're so dangerous that they're completely fine without eyeballs. There's no natural selection consequence there. So we have tiger snakes, we have king browns, we have the inland taipan. All of these animals are fairly dangerous. They're all in the top whatever dangerous animal. The answer is they're all going to kill if you get bit and don't seek medical attention. So ranking them, they're all bad. If by bad we mean you want to stay alive. They're collectively not the best thing to get in contact with. So we have elapids. If you had to save one location on the planet to save as many lizards as possible, the answer is Australia. They have the highest abundance of biodiversity and numbers of lizards in all of the world. They also have some of the largest lizards. So they're the main area where goannas live. These are the monitor lizards. The famous one's the Komodo dragon. They're over here, but a lot of the monitor lizards are in mainland Australia. Monitor lizards are proper venomous. It's not nasty bacteria or whatever, they have actual venom. They can get incredibly large, about 9 or 10 feet. They can run about as fast as a human. Those live there. The one native-y thing, I call foul on this. This is the only placental mammal that's native to Australia. It was brought over by humans. That's not native. That's an introduced animal that's become naturalized. It's the dingo. The dingo's closest living relative is the wolf. We were just hanging out with them at the time, brought them over, thought it was a good idea, and then went, oh crap, they're spreading everywhere. What should we do? Largest fence that has ever existed. Kind of works. They spend millions of dollars a year maintaining a fence. You can see it from space. There's a dingo fence in Australia. So we brought those over, that's a problem. Brought rabbits over. First two colonizing ships were like, you know what's a good idea? Rabbits. I want to hunt those things. And then they went, oh no, they breed like rabbits. This is a problem. So this became a huge problem. They were literally going across the landscape eating everything. So in the 90s, they were working towards a viral, like this is some sci-fi level stuff, right? They engineered a virus to attack the rabbits. Remember, everything else is marsupial, so you can engineer something to attack placental mammals without hurting almost anything. It either was released on accident, which sounds like Resident Evil, or it was released on purpose by somebody who was frustrated with the timing. I don't know. There's 600,000 at the time. That means that somebody's got genetic variability to deal with the problem, which means that they killed probably 590,000 of them, and those that remained are now immune to the viral strains that they were working on. So we now have 200 to 300 million rabbits that are immune to our viral attempts at destroying them in Australia. So Australia's interesting. Then enter the cane toad. The cane toad said, all of those things are cute. You know, watch what happens when I show up. The cane toad was brought over by people. The Australian government has an agricultural focus on sugarcane. So it's actually called the marine toad. Its common name is the cane toad. They brought it over to eat these beetles. The beetles eat the roots of the cane, or the beetle larvae eat the roots of the cane, and then the adult beetles kind of fly up outside of that little area where the cane toads would reside. Cane toads don't eat cane beetles. So just bad call on this part. It turns out the larvae dig in the roots. That's not where the cane toad eats. And then the beetle flies just this far up into the ecosystem, and the cane toad can't get it. So we brought an animal over that doesn't even do what we thought it was going to do. We did this in Australia. We did this in a few mainland islands or offshore islands. We did it in Hawaii. It doesn't eat the cane beetles. So this is just a very terrible idea. They were brought over in a suitcase filled with sawdust. Like a single dude was like, that seems like a good idea, let me get some of those. And then they just released them. This has caused what is likely to be one of the largest ecological disasters because they thought it would be a good idea. So today, in Australia, the estimates, this is not just the highest, these are fairly conservative things that we can find. If you lined up all the people who live in Australia, each one of them has 61 toad counterparts. There are far more toads in Australia than there are people. So the toads are doing a really, really good job. Welcome to a cane toad. That's a very large cane toad. Like, they can get, everybody's like, oh, that's a big toad. That's a big toad, right? If it moves, they eat it. Mechanically, that's how their eyes work. It wiggles, I'm gonna eat it. If it fits in their mouth, I'm gonna eat it. They're incredibly poisonous. They can kill humans. A few people try to like smoke the poison. It's not that kind of toad, and it can kill you. They reproduce really rapidly. They take the opposite strategy of humans. We have one or two, typically care about them a lot, give them a lot of stuff. Cane toads say, hey, here's 30,000 babies, good luck. But what happens is they're incredibly poisonous, which means that they're protected against things that could eat them because they are inherently dangerous. So they're poisonous, they have really rapid reproduction. And if you're Australia, you evolved over evolutionary time without ever seeing a toad, which means that you don't know what a toad looks like. So, we are prepped for a problem. We are prepped for an ecological disaster. We have evolutionary time working against us. We have an incredibly successful, poisonous, reproducing generalist. They eat everything. That's Florida. I'll talk about Florida in a minute. That's a soft-shell turtle. So we have a cane toad eating a turtle, cane toad eating a snake, cane toad eating a bat, cane toad eating a mouse, cane toad eating a cane toad. If it moves, they eat it. I think that big one dies because it got poisoned. Like, it's not immune to itself. So cane toads eat everything. I made a meme for this. I'm actually disproportionately proud of it. I laughed in my office for like 10 minutes because I was like, this is gold. So you really this is also 100% scientifically accurate. Australia had a bunch of really dangerous stuff and said, we've got nothing but dust and blood, right? And cane toad said, we have blood to spare. So this is exactly the strategy that Thanos' army took in Infinity War, right? That spoiler, they lost. Cane toads won. I'm going to show you the blood they had to spare. Like, this is an intense fight that happened. So first up are pythons. First of all, that python is doing something that no human can. Hang from a ledge, grab a 40-pound thing, and headlock it at the same time. The strength here is through the roof. They're doing things that you just can't do as a human being. Poisoned. That cane toad gets to live. It got bit by the snake, got constricted. It's fine. It's an ectothermic, can go a couple hours without oxygen. So it's just hanging out, waiting for the python to die. Python's dead. That's a death adder. It's dead. So the death adder envenomated the toad. The toad died. Toad poisoned the death adder. Death adder died. There are more toads than death adders. There's blood to spare, right? Crocs. In a lot of different populations, we're seeing crocodile reductions greater than 75%. And it happened at the same time that the cane toad showed up. The monitor lizards, that's the cane toad. That's the monitor. Dingoes. That's the little cane toad that threw up and then died. We're usually at about a 10-15 minute ingestion rate. You bite it and you've got about that amount of time for your heart. Either goes really fast or really slow. It just doesn't stay normal. It gets outside that. So we have blood to spare from these cane toads. This is one population of cane toads. So on the x-axis is time, on the y-axis is abundance. So in 2005, there weren't that many cane toads that you could find in this specific location. At the end of 2005, we see cane toad numbers start to go up a little bit, and we see a peak around 2008, 2009. We're starting to get them back down, but not enough that it's going to have that big of an effect. So at the same time that this is happening, we're monitoring the populations of everything else. Verandas monitor lizards, right? 2001, 2002, 2003, 2005, cane toads simply exist. We're almost extinct by 2010. They're eating things that are moving. There are cane toads in hyperabundance. They're cane toads that are going to win out this situation. The branded lizards have never identified a cane toad as a dangerous animal. It's a sweet little food snack that they bite and realize they've died. Snakes, black lines the population, 2005. Look at the abundance. They found 2 toads a night. And in the year they found 2 toads a night, they reduced snake populations by 75%. This is just simply existing in the location and replenishing those extra cane toads. There's a sweet little kid in there. 1996, you'd go to an individual plot. This is an area that you say, okay, I'm going to count the number of mammals that I find there. I'm going to quantify what they are. So 1996, they'd find about a dozen of any given species inside a plot. 2008, they're averaging less than 1. That means there's a lot of empty plots. Same thing with the species richness. There's about 3 species that they find per plot in 1996, and in 2008 they're less than 1. So we're seeing areas that are becoming completely devoid of what are arguably some of the most dangerous animals on the planet. The cane toad just existed, and these populations just collapsed. This is the invasion. I'm going to call it an invasion. Like, this is, like, the cane toads didn't get together and form wartime strategy, right? But they are doing things that look exactly like wartime strategy. They have partitioned out who the fighters are, who the sprinters are, who the reproducers are, and this is unfolding across all of Australia. So the line is where they are today. The green is where they think they can go. The desert is the holdout that nobody's living in. So at least for now, the cane toads can't survive lack of water and extreme heat. But if there's a forested location, they can move across it. Yeah. I think the average numbers are 800 an acre. Like 61 per person is high, but the humans aren't living evenly across the area. So we're seeing 800 cane toads an acre. That's incredibly insane. There are competitions in cities to see how far you can hit one with a golf club. This is fostered whole new discussions of, it's not the toad's fault. We need to figure out how to humanely euthanize them. But you drive in a city with cane toads on the road, you're probably running over 300 of them. Like, these are taking over the area, and they're all poisonous. And so you can't just pick them up, because then you have to worry about scratching your eyes or a cut on your hand. So this is a really awkward situation to be in. So, figures. Okay. Leg length. The amount you moved. Did you know that if you have longer legs as a toad, you can move greater distance? That's just what I've said, right? Toads with longer legs move greater distances. This is the weird one. This sent up the flag that said toads are doing something different. So this is days of the time that you arrived. So day 0 is you're a toad in a brand new ecosystem that was toad-free. 800 is you've been in that ecosystem for 800 days. So let's just say 3 years. So if we take toads from what they're calling the invasion front, they have longer legs. Toads that have longer legs travel farther. Toads that have shorter legs don't travel nearly as far. So in the invasion front, we have marathon toads. At the epicenter of the invasion, we have the breeders. They're 2 different types of toad behavior based on where they're found. So as a result, the invasion isn't going up at a steady pace. The toads aren't just walking the same amount of time. This is the nightmare for Australia. The invasion is exponential. That's the distance the toads are covering every year. They're not covering 10 kilometers a year. They're covering at an exponential curve, which means if you prep based on the historical movements, you're years behind by the time that the toads actually get there. You're not ready for when they arrive yet. So predicting where these toads go is becoming a problem. You can do a lot of stuff with these toads. You can put them on a treadmill. That's what this project is. Like, hey, how long does it take you to go 10 meters? How long does it take you to hop 10 meters? So if we pull a toad from the invasion front, it takes it about 100 seconds. Pull a toad from the long-established population also takes about 100 seconds. So they're not moving faster, but then just turn the treadmill on until the toad just gets exhausted. invasion front toads travel for 4 times the length. They endure more. Their muscle physiology is different. Their cardiovascular physiology is different. The invading front toads are different animals than the long-established population toads. So you have your soldiers and your breeders. So this is like a weird alien invasion. This is the rates of the movement. So this is the year that they showed up. So we have 1930s here, I think that's probably 2005. So you can see they showed up, and you can see that they've made it to Darwin finally. And this interesting thing happens. We're pretty certain somebody just took one. So that we didn't expect, but there's now a new one, so that's interesting. And then this is the rate of the movements. So this is 10 to 15 kilometers a year. This is 50 kilometers a year. If you're a toad from this population, you're not moving very much. If you're a toad from this population, your population has the ability to move 50 kilometers that year, which means that you have to contact the next town and say, toads are coming. We gotta figure this out. Like literally warn your children, don't pick up the toad. If I was a kid and saw a toad that big, I would be all over that thing. There's a massive toad, that sounds awesome, but that has fatal consequences, especially to your dogs. You ever heard the idea of make love, not war? Toads flipped it. They said, it's time for war, no time for love. If you're an invading front toad, you're not reproducing, you're invading. If you're a long-established population, you're reproducing. You're producing the next generation that will slowly make its way to the population that the invaders have broken. Like this sounds like wartime stuff. So the individuals that can sprint far are not wasting their time making more babies. They're the blood to spare in the ecosystem that's going to drop the monitor populations, they're going to drop the snake populations, they're going to drop all the marsupials, and then slowly over time, all the reproducers are just going to dump their babies into this now free ecosystem. This is different than how most invasive species work. So what's being done? I love this story. Crows figured it out first. Humans were looking at this, we spent millions of dollars, we're like, how do we protect the animals? And crows just said, if you flip them over, you can eat their liver without getting to the poison. And they then just taught each other. So the crows are doing fine in Australia because they just teach each other how to eat the toads. And as long as you avoid the parotid glands, you got a sweet liver to eat. So the toads solved it. Mammals, sweeping statement, mammals are not nearly as intelligent as we like to think they are because we're a mammal, we want to be special. We have to train the mammals. So we make toad sausages. We take a bunch of toad legs and grind them up and then sneak one little baby toad into it so it smells and tastes like toad, and then dump a bunch of nausea-inducing medication into the sausage, and then we just release those into the wild. And all the quolls and all the mammals that eat it, and then throw up and have a terrible 3 days and think, I'm never eating a toad again. So we can at least almost like inoculate the populations against the toads that are coming by training them not to eat the toads that will be there. But now you're just like living with the enemy kind of thing. Like they're there, you just now no longer really compete with one another. These cane toads are so gnarly that they sense the smell of their own kind so that they can grow faster to go eat them. So like, if you put in two populations of cane toads in one pond, it's now a race to who can get large enough, fast enough to eat the other group. They're not cordial about it. They'll go after one another. So we figured out how to take that scent and build it into a bait. So we can at least trap for these tadpoles in ponds to get them out of the ponds. One night of trapping pulls an average of about 8,000 toadlets per tray, which sounds awesome. But there's probably like 200 million tadpoles in there. So it's probably not doing anything. So we have to figure out how to make this a little bit more concentrated and bring an effect in. Modeling. I share the same sentiment as Dr. Willand. Yeah, they're useful. Let's just look at some colors. Let's just do that. Black is where the toads are. We good with that part of the model? All right. Orange is where we think they're gonna be next, and blue is where they could go. So orange is the area that the Australian government has essentially identified as, let's attack there. We know we're going to lose in a head-to-head against the toads where they're at, but let's at least make it really difficult to invade the next location. So they're focusing their trap efforts on the expansion zone to try to get those low reproducing toads out of those environments to prevent the further spread. So there's at least some efforts in an attempt to stop this. I think from my perspective, we just shouldn't call it an invasion. Toads just live there now. Like, they just, Australia's theirs. We're never getting the toads out of there. I'm going to end with this. Like I said, I don't have a good ending. It's just going to stop. And then you're just going to be like, oh, okay. I don't know. I don't think any of you young people have seen the movie The Blob. There's a blob, it eats stuff. That's the premise of the movie. It's a lot of, oh no, and then it like absorbs a car. These are the last 2 lines of the movie. So there's a dude named Dave and a dude named Steve. They trap the blob in the Arctic. And they say, at least we have it stopped. And Steve says, yeah, as long as the Arctic stays cold. Okay. Global climate change. Solid fact at this point. No one's arguing it. Non-scientists are arguing it. Congratulations, that doesn't matter. Scientists know that this is happening. Welcome to Florida. Welcome to the cane toad's natural distribution. There's no fence that's going to stop these cane toads. What's stopping the cane toads is the same thing that's stopping them in centralized Australia. It's desert, it's dry, and it's warm. As climate change shifts, we're going to see increased rainfall, we're going to see increased temperature, which means we're going to see the cane toads move. I don't know confidence in this statement, but I think by the time all of you are retiring, cane toads are going to be in Missouri. I think that's where we're at. Because cane toads are in the United States. The only thing stopping them is the frost line. And we're effectively killing the frost line by changing the climate. So the story we just told about Australia is the story that we'll probably tell after I retire and the next biologist comes up and we do an Oceania semester for the United States. It'll be cane toad invasions in the United States. That's at least the current prediction for what cane toads are. We have toads in the United States, so maybe they'll be able to evolve alongside them. But if Australia tells us anything or Guam tells us anything, it's that when something new shows up, it's usually a disaster caused by humans, and the natural population suffers as a consequence. That's it. I'm done.